Granblue Fantasy Relink is a game with 19 different playable characters, all with different skills and unique mechanics, and as someone that has put over 300 hours into the game, in today's video I will be ranking every single character from best to worst. Please keep in mind that you can easily beat all the content in this game with any character and that there are no bad characters. I'll be taking into account what each of them brings to a quest, so that is their overall kit and mechanics, utility through crowd control or supportive buffs and debuffs, how sustainable each character can be, and finally how much damage they can output and how consistently can they do it. I will be using these criteria to rank each character from C to S, and I'll be sure to include the overall rankings. With that being said, hello everyone, my name is Dark Hero and let's get started. The first character on the list is going to be Percival, a character that is capable of dealing tons of damage by using his skills to charge up his Schlatt faster, that he can also perfectly time to be able to use as a parry. And thanks to his skill granting him supplementary damage, combined with the rotor wireball, as well as some skill cancels, Percival's damage output is going to go through the roof. On top of that, he's got the ability to lower the enemy's defense while also slowing them at the same time, so Percival does get some party-wide utility there. Ultimately, Percival is a very selfish DPS that doesn't have any sustainability, so he's going to have to rely on the parries to be able to power through attacks. That being said, Percival is a character that excels at dealing damage, with only a couple of characters being able to compete with him, so at the end of the day, I'm going to be ranking Percival as an S tier character. The next character on the list is going to be Vane. Now, Vane is a pretty straightforward character, by far one of the easiest in the entire game, as you can pretty much just throw yourself at the enemies, and thanks to Vane's support skills he'll be able to regenerate health as he deals damage to enemies, while at the same time being able to become an unkillable machine thanks to his skills that will not only grant him guts, but they will also raise his attack and defense, with Soul Eruption also being able to be used to heal himself. He's by far one of the most sustainable characters in the entire game, and thanks to his unique sigil, Vane will be able to only take 30% of the damage that he would receive from any attack, and of course we can't forget about the utility that his protective dome provides, being able to place down a massive shield that is able to cover everyone, so that nobody has to take any damage or deal with any mechanics. That being said, Vane is lacking when it comes to actual CC, and he also doesn't have a lot of damage. But because he is able to reliably sustain himself, you never have to really care about whatever the boss is doing, you can just keep on focusing on attacking, and it's very unlikely that you will ever go down. For all of these reasons, I will be ranking Vane as an A tier character. He was very close to getting into S rank, but the lack of CC and damage doesn't quite put him there. The next character on the list is going to be Lancelot. This agile dual wielding character is all about getting up close and dealing as much damage as possible, all the while being able to consistently evade damage so that he is able to retain his aggression. Lancelot is a very simple character that will always find an opening to deal damage, and with the ability to have mirror image so that he never takes damage, while also being able to freeze the enemies for a period of time so that everybody on the party can deal damage, and so that you can chain CC a boss and stun lock them, is going to make your fights a whole lot easier. And with one of his skills granting him supplementary damage, he is always going to be a reliable character. Lancelot does have pretty decent damage. It's nothing too crazy, but it is very consistent, but you can think of him as a selfish DPS that also has the ability to freeze. So overall, I would rate Lancelot as an A tier character, being one that lets you get away with pretty much anything, all the while attacking bosses and having some party-wide utility. Now, that being said, if you're using flight over fight with Lancelot and go with my build so that you can dodge everything and never take a single hit, then I would say that Lancelot is an S tier character because you're able to optimize his damage while at the same time not having to deal with anything the boss throws at you. Now, the next character is going to be Vaseraga, one of the slowest characters in Granblue Fantasy Relink that is all about doing these powerful charged attacks that can deal millions of damage in a single instance. And with his ability to chain skills into charged attacks to be able to use them faster, Vaseraga's damage output is absolutely insane. Additionally, Vaseraga counts with the ability to not only grant himself stout heart, but also increase his attack and defense, so he really gets to stay up close next to the boss, not caring about whatever they're doing and just dealing a ton of damage. Additionally, thanks to Vaseraga's skill Immortal Pain, this character is capable of actually becoming unkillable, as the buff Undying is going to make it so that his HP never goes below 1. on top of granting him the buff immunity, which is just going to make things easier. And thanks to Vaseraga's unique sigil, you'll gain so much cooldown reduction after using your charged attacks, to the point where if you go with my build, you'll be able to have a permanent uptime on Immortal Pain cooldown, so you just never get a chance to die with Vaseraga. That being said, him being so slow does have a little bit of a drawback, as there may be occasions where you won't have enough time to pull off the charged attacks, but Vaseraga does count with the ability to naturally gap close, and another one of his skills also is a gap closer, so he's actually pretty good at staying close to the boss. And to top it all off, Vaseraga is also capable of slowing down the enemies, and he's also got some more party-wide utility with him being able to become a tank, gaining hostility and making the enemies more likely to attack him, as well as the ability to take damage in place of his allies, that of course you can combine with Immortal Pain to make sure that nobody takes damage. Ultimately, Vaseraga is just an incredible character, and so for his top tier damage, the ability to never go down, and the party-wide utility he provides, I will be ranking Vaseraga as an S tier character. The next character on the list is going to be Siegfried. Siegfried is all about doing the perfectly timed attacks, chaining them together with his lunge to non-stop attack the bosses and deal massive damage thanks to his combo finisher. That being said, Siegfried becomes uninterruptible while he is performing the lunges, and when performing the perfectly timed combo finisher, he also gains Stout Heart as well as attack and defense buffs, so he can ignore the boss's attacks and just focus on dealing damage, which a lot of other characters cannot afford to do. Additionally, he also has a lot of party-wide utility with Salvatore being able to provide debuff immunity as well as drain to all of your allies, which is certainly going to help make things easier for you, and the skill Mirage is one of the best buffs in the entire game, being able to provide a 70% defense bonus to the entire party. This will ensure that for a long period of time, nobody in the party will go down from a one-shot, not even a two-shot. And if you add some cooldown reduction to Siegfried, you'll see that you'll be able to have a very good uptime on the Mirage buff, so personally I value having him in the party a lot. That being said, Siegfried's lack of CC does hinder him a little bit, but regardless he is still a very solid character, so ultimately I will be ranking him as an A tier character. The next character on the list is going to be Ghandagoza, the slowest character in Granblue Fantasy Relink that is all about charging up his Eternal Rage to be able to deal tons of damage with his Raging Fist. However, the problem is that Ghandagoza doesn't have a lot of ways to quickly fill up his Eternal Rage meter, and so he won't have as many opportunities to use his Raging Fist, which means that your damage output is going to be reduced. On top of that, because damage cap is the way that it is in this game, Raging Fist doesn't even deal that much damage, and so you end up with a character that has to rely on perfect timing his attacks, with the shortest route to be able to fill up the Eternal Rage actually being jumping attacks, which don't deal a lot of damage, and sadly most of Ghandagoza's skills do not give him Eternal Rage, which is just going to slow you down. Speaking of which, Ghandagoza does have a party-wide utility in the form of a slow, and he can also play the role of a tank, and is actually quite capable of sustaining himself, having the ability to restore all of his HP and removing debuffs. That being said, at the end of the day, I really do believe that Ghandagoza ends up feeling weaker compared to the entire cast, and while you can still clear all the content in the game with ease, I would say that Ghandagoza is going to be in the C tier. The next character is going to be Narmaya. Being a character that is capable of dealing tons of damage while being able to swap her stances to best fit the scenario, all the while having a charged parry and very powerful skills, Narmaya is a very powerful selfish DPS, with a combination of Dance of Pink Petals, Transient and Setsuna, allowing for Narmaya's damage output to be absolutely crazy. There is a little bit of a learning curve with her, but if you can get her combos down and learn the trick to be able to swap stances at the perfect time every single time, she's going to reliably deal tons of damage. That being said, she does have a little bit of party-wide utility, being able to apply a slow in the form of a counter, and you can also play her as a little bit of a tank as she can generate enmity while at the same time gaining butterflies and lowering the enemy's defense. Though ultimately Narmaya's role is going to be that of a damage dealer, and she does a phenomenal job at that. However, it doesn't quite reach the leagues of Vaseraga, Percival and Rackam, so for all of these reasons I will be ranking Narmaya as an A tier character. And given that we have just mentioned Rackam, let's talk about him. Rackam is the quintessential selfish DPS. When it comes to deal damage, there is currently no one better than him in Granblue Fantasy Relink. As with the aerial shotgun playstyle, you can absolutely decimate any boss's HP, although you can argue that that playstyle isn't very much reliable, but you can easily mix the aerial shotgun playstyle while also being able to hit the enemies from a distance, with his burst shot damage as well as the bullseye blast, dealing a lot of damage. Rackam doesn't really offer much besides damage, as all of his skills are either about buffing himself or just dealing as much damage as possible, with the only thing that he can offer the party being a 10% defense decrease. That being said, the damage that he does offer is absolutely nuts, and with the current only indication that we have to measure damage being the 60-second damage test, where Rackam is able to deal 80 million damage, where most of the cast cannot even reach 40 million, I think you just have to recognize how crazy powerful this character is. So it goes without saying that Rackam deserves to be in the S tier. Now, if this playstyle were to be nerfed, the conversation would be a little bit different, and I would probably place him between A and B tier, because being a ranged damage dealer, despite not offering much to the party, he's able to consistently deal damage while being safe, and that is very valuable. The next character on the list is going to be Yodarha. This agile character is all about going in, performing his combos and going into the combo finisher to maintain the rotation that allows him to perpetually become invincible, so he can have an easy time dealing damage against bosses even when they are in bloodthirsts or doing a big powerful AoE attack. Additionally, Yodarha also has a parry that grants him supplementary damage, so he has a way to not only protect himself, but also boost his damage output, so that is very valuable. And as if that wasn't enough, the skill Flashing Void allows Yodarha to deal a lot of damage all the while being invulnerable for a very long period of time, so again you don't have to worry about anything while you're doing this. And not only is he able to grant himself mirror image, but if Yodarha has all three of his marks, he is able to share that mirror image buff with the entire party. And so you can ensure that not only you, but your teammates as well, will be able to tank 3 hits without taking any damage, and that, in my opinion, is a lot more valuable than any attack down or defense buff you may have. That being said, Yodarha's damage output isn't really the greatest, and he doesn't offer any form of crowd control, so he is a little bit lacking in that regard. But ultimately, given how much invincibility you can have on this character, and giving that extra safety to your allies being so valuable, I will be ranking Yodarha as an A tier character. The next character is going to be Ferry, a character that is all about using her pets to deal as much damage as possible, while also inflicting the enemy with attack down and defense down permanently thanks to her own unique sigil. Thanks to Ferry's whip, she's able to hit the enemies from a pretty long distance, which makes her a little bit of a safer character, and thanks to her pets, she'll be able to deal some consistent damage, as even if the boss goes into bloodthirst, you'll see that her ghost will often be attacking the boss at the same time. She can also deal a lot of damage, especially when using the aerial barrage playstyle, and with her onslaught dealing tons of damage, especially against large targets that you can hit multiple parts, she is just a very solid character. On top of that, her skill Purge Spirits not only places all 3 of her pets on the battlefield at once, but it also deals a ton of stun damage, which means Ferry will be able to more easily proc link attacks, which is always helpful, and because most of her attacks have such a big wide range, and with so many bosses, especially in the endgame, being able to summon adds or crystals, whatever you want to call them, that you are incentivized or sometimes even required to break, Ferry can do that very easily, and sometimes she doesn't even have to do it because her pets will do it for her. She can also play very aggressively with her skills Heinrichten and Umlauf, granting her critical hit rate, supplementary damage and invincibility, as well as Stout Heart, so when it is time for Ferry to get up close, either with the aerial playstyle or to go with Onslaught, she has a consistent way to be able to do that safely. So the drawback of being a long-range character that has to go in to deal more damage ends up being somewhat negated. Ferry is just a very nice all-rounder that I think is going to benefit pretty much any team. She can also play the role of a support character, being able to provide regen, defense buff and attack up, and while her damage output is very solid, it's not that close to the highest damage dealers, and the only form of crowd control she offers is a slow that only summons one of her pets, so I don't think it's a worthwhile skill to take, so ultimately I will be ranking Ferry as an A tier character. The next character on the list is going to be Eugen, the second gunner of the game that is capable of dealing crazy amounts of damage from a distance, while at the same time having some of the best party-wide utility you can have. His playstyle is all about going into sniper mode, firing off powerful charged attacks, and also throwing his grenades, which actually is what deals the most damage in his kit. In terms of support ability, not only does Eugen have the ability to paralyze the enemies, which is the best form of CC in the entire game, he can also poison the enemies while also inflicting them with defense down, so you can deal a lot of damage over time thanks to the poison and help those that have yet to hit the damage cap deal even more damage. With some rack, he can also deal tons of damage, especially against enemies that have multiple parts that you can hit, as this laser beam actually pierces through targets. So for example, in Proto Bahamut, you would be able to line up all of the crystals that spawn and kill them all at once with the use of a single skill, and that's just very powerful. Additionally, he can also use healing bullets to be able to heal his allies, so Eugen, in my opinion, is just a perfect character that you will always want to have on your party, because he can safely deal consistent damage while also providing you with some of the best utility in the game. And so it goes without saying that Eugen is going to be in the S tier. Next on the list is going to be the captain, Gran or Djeeta. Now the captain is capable of doing a lot. Given that they have the most amount of skills in the entire game, they're able to provide a wide range of utility to the party, being able to inflict defense down, attack down, or even both at the same time through the same skill, while also being able to cleanse, heal, provide debuff immunity, or even revive an ally. If there is a hole in your party that needs to be filled, the captain can very easily cover it for you. Additionally, the captain is also quite capable of dealing good damage, with some new tech showing that the captain, specifically Djeeta, because Gran and Djeeta have different combo routes, can output some crazy damage with her combo cancels, but if you were to go with that, you would be giving up on some of your utility, and it's actually quite difficult to pull off. The captain can also act as a tank of the group, being able to provide up to a 70% damage reduction, which is just absurd, and if you want to be freaky with it, you can go with substitute, and if you take improved dodge and flight over fights, you can very easily dodge into attacks to gain invincibility, and so no one in the entire party will take any damage. There are some crazy things that you can pull off with the captain, and again, the vast array of party-wide utility that they provide is absolutely phenomenal, and so I will be ranking the captain as an S tier character. Now the next character on the list is going to be Cagliostro, a spellcaster that is capable of doing a lot of damage thanks to her collapse that can be charged faster by performing offensive skills before. And thanks to her unique sigil, she will be able to inflict the enemy with a permanent 30% defense down debuff. That being said, Cagliostro is not all about damage. In fact, she has a lot of utility baked into her kit with plenty of supportive skills. Not only is she capable of healing your allies as well as revive them, she's also capable of reducing the enemy's attack by 20% thanks to her traps, and also dispel a buff from the enemy. That being said, the star of Cagliostro's skills is of course Phantasmagoria, a buff that will provide your party with attack up, defense up, and critical hit rate, being the only way in the entire game for you to raise your allies' crit. That being said, a lot of these buffs end up losing a lot of utility once you reach the endgame, where people tend to be around the 95 to 100% crit chance, and very often most characters will be spec'd to be hitting the damage cap, so the defense down debuff as well as the attack up buff are not going to matter as much. That being said, you're still going to find some use cases for them. More likely than not, most characters will not be hitting the damage cap on the Skybound arts, and in some cases like Charlotta for example, they have a very hard time hitting the damage cap, and so Cagliostro is going to make that a whole lot easier for them. Additionally, Cagliostro is actually capable of doing a lot of damage, with her optimal rotation utilizing her combo finishers to deal as much damage as possible, using Alexandria and Mimic Doll to charge up the collapse even faster, and utilizing Pain Train to deal a lot of damage, especially against large enemies that they can hit multiple times, and this skill is a beast during lane time. Cagliostro is one of those characters that, depending on how optimal your characters are already built, she's going to be more or less valuable. But even if you are already maxed out, she is always going to be bringing some good value to the team, so at the very least I would rank Cagliostro as an A tier character. The next character on our list is going to be Charlotta. This small potato is capable of doing tremendous amounts of damage. As I've shown in my damage ranking videos, she doesn't quite reach the top 5 damage dealers, but she is a very good contender as her combo cancels allow her to use noble stance to deal a lot of damage, and since Charlotta not only has the ability to reduce damage taken but also grant herself invincibility, and given how mobile she is, she's able to non-stop attack the boss and just focus on dealing tons of damage. Additionally, Charlotta also has the ability to parry incoming attacks, and with one of her sigils, a successful parry would mean that she would become invulnerable for 5 seconds and also get an attack up buff, which is not going to be wasted because the damage cap for the Noble Stance Lunge is very high, so if you can master Charlotta, your damage output is going to go through the roof. And as I said before, her ability to become invincible and also providing a 50% damage cut to herself and the rest of the party means that she is capable of bringing a lot of value to the team. Additionally, she is also capable of reducing the enemy's defense. It's only by 15%, which isn't a big deal, but given her very short cooldowns that get further reduced because of her sigil, she'll be able to maintain that debuff on the enemy for a very long period of time. But sadly, Charlotta does not provide any sort of crowd control to the team, but even so, I still find that she is an incredible character to play, and as I've said many times before, she is very easy to pick up and use, even though she is very difficult to master, so you can have a beginner player pick up Charlotta and they are going to do well. So ultimately, I will be ranking Charlotta as an S tier character. The next character on the list is going to be Io, the final ranged character that is capable of dealing tons of damage with the right spell rotations and by charging up her Stargaze, which thanks to her support skill Quick Cast, you'll be able to do it much faster after gaining a Spirit Orb. So once more, it's the gameplay loop where you want to use your skills to be able to use your charged attack much faster, as most of Io's skills will grant her a Mystic Orb upon casting them. Additionally, Io is able to provide some party-wide utility and support, being able to heal her allies, lower the enemy's attack and defense, and best of all, she counts with the best CC in the game, a Paralysis. She's a character that can do crazy amounts of damage in a single hit, and with some advanced tech, you'll see that Io has a lot to offer. That being said, her actual DPS over the course of a quest is not going to be the highest because she does rely on that Stargaze to do big damage numbers, but because she is a ranged character, she is able to consistently keep on dealing damage, so you don't have to worry about dodging or stopping your cast too much. She is a very solid character that is going to perform very well in just about any party, although I'm not quite sure it's enough to put her in the S rank, so ultimately I will be ranking Io as an A tier character. Now the next character is going to be Rosetta, a character that utilizes the roses she can plant to passively deal damage to enemies while at the same time buffing her allies. Being able to attack from a medium distance allows Rosetta to keep on attacking from a pretty safe spot, and having the roses constantly deal damage to the enemies is always going to be beneficial in her case. That being said, having to relocate the plants, make sure that they stay on top of the boss whenever they move, is going to cut into some of Rosetta's DPS. But even so, she brings value to the team, as you can set your plants to have a passive effect where they can boost your allies' attack, defense, or give them a little bit of health regen. Rosetta also has the support ability to quickly heal her allies while at the same time removing any debuffs, and she is also able to provide a damage cut buff that can go up to 40% whenever her plants are at max level. Sadly, the only form of crowd control she offers is poison, but it is something that she will be constantly applying given that Rose Tycoon is one of her most useful skills. She's got some good damage output with a combination of Iron Maiden and Spiral Rose, and she can actually combo off of characters such as Eugen to deal even more damage. That being said, her damage output at the end of the day ends up being somewhat low because of the constraint of having to move the roses around, and even though you may have some skills that help you doing that a little bit faster, at the end of the day you'll be taking up a skill slot just to make sure that you're able to maintain DPS instead of adding a skill that would deal more damage. Rosetta definitely brings a lot of value to any party she's in, and especially if there's an Eugen there because of a specific interaction with his grenades, but ultimately I don't think that she is an amazing character to have on the team, as you cannot slow or paralyze the enemies, nor can you lower their defense, for example. And a lot of these defensive benefits that you can get from her, you can get much better ones from different characters, all of which will be dealing more damage than Rosetta. So ultimately, the thing that sets her apart from the rest of the cast is the passive damage and effects that come from the roses, and it's not even that great. So ultimately, I will be ranking Rosetta as a C tier character despite me liking her so much. After that we have Katalina, a character that can empower her skills and also gain more powerful combos by filling up her Ares gauge, which she can do so by triggering link attacks, using skills or performing a combo finisher. And because Katalina relies on the Ares gauge so much, in terms of damage output she ends up being a burst character that wants to save most cooldowns for whenever the Ares gauge is full to be able to utilize them to deal as much damage as possible, extending her duration in Ares mode so that she can perform more empowered combos and deal as much damage as possible. That being said, it's not just damage that Katalina offers. Not only is she able to heal her allies, but she is also able to gain invincibility, as well as a defense up bonus and stout heart, and she can share these buffs with her allies as long as she uses these skills while Ares is active. It's not ideal having to save up some skills to only use whenever the gauge is full, but she does have a lot of reliable ways to be able to fill it up quickly. And in addition to that, with the skill Secret Winds, Katalina is able to freeze the enemies, with the duration increasing if Ares is summoned, and of course her allies can take advantage of this situation to deal as much damage as possible. Ultimately, Katalina is a very solid character with a very simple game plan and with a variety of ways on how to execute it, so there is a lot of versatility there. Her own damage output isn't the greatest, it's really nothing too special, but given the amount of utility that she is able to provide, and again being able to share Stout Heart or invincibility with the entire party, means that the entire party can just run up to the boss and keep on piling up damage regardless of what it is they're doing, or you can save up the invincibility for some big attacks, and this is of course going to be incredibly valuable. I am still a bit undecided on how I would rank Katalina, because I just wish that her damage output would be higher, as the only way to make her competitive in that sense would be to remove all of her utility skills, and that would still end up placing her in the 30 to 35 million damage in the 60-second test, which is not ideal. So if you are someone that values DPS above other things, I would say that Katalina ranks as an A tier character, but if you value overall utility and support, then she is a straight up S tier. The next character on the list is going to be my personal favorite, Id. He's all about going into 3 different modes, his base form, dragon mode, and then god might, and utilizing his skills to deal more damage, with all of his base skills becoming empowered while he is in god might, and him receiving a new set of skills whenever he enters dragon mode. And of course, with the skill Ragnarok form, it can instantly go into dragon mode, or he can opt to use Ragnarok form to pull off an extra combo finisher to deal even more damage. There are a lot of ways to play this character. Either you want to go into dragon mode, stay there as long as possible before going into god might, or maybe you want to rush into god might to be able to unleash your empowered skills and your powerful combo finishers before going back to base form and doing the same thing over again. That being said, it does have a lot that is not going for him, because the transformation sequence takes such a long time, and because even the combo finishers in God Might have such a long duration, they are very long commitment attacks. Very often you'll find yourself going for the combo finisher and the boss moves away, they enter Bloodthirst, and even though sometimes you are still able to cancel them without spamming the God Might gauge, if the boss straight up goes into Overdrive or Bloodthirst, they will push you away and you will lose it, and that never feels good. And because these transformation sequences also take a long time, your overall DPS with Id is going to be lower than you might expect, because while his attacks do actually do a lot of damage, there is a lot of downtime whenever you're playing as Id. Now, he is able to actually provide you with some pretty nice party-wide utility, with the skill Atonement being essentially very similar to what Vaseraga can do, where it can take damage in place of all of his allies for a certain amount of duration, and he will then unleash a counter that is going to deal more damage the more damage it has received. It's nice that he can tank damage in place of his allies, but because you don't gain damage reduction while you're doing this, it ends up actually being a little bit risky, so I really don't think that you should take this into account. That being said, it has a skill that is able to apply a slow through Arcadia, and whenever he actually enters Dragon Mode, it gains a new Arcadia skill that is also a slow but also applies damage over time in the form of a burn, which means that it can have a very good uptime on the slow debuff, which is just a nice way for you and your allies to deal more damage against the enemy. Additionally, while it is in Dragon Mode, he's able to perform a barrage of ranged attacks, so given that he can use projectiles at any moment, he then gets the luxury of being able to deal damage to bosses whenever whenever they are far away, whenever they enter Bloodthirst, or are doing a big AoE attack around them that you need to get away from. There are a lot of cool and fun things about it, but there are also some things that are going to rank him lower on the list, some big downsides that are hard to ignore in my opinion, and I didn't even touch on the subject that if you die as id while in Dragon mode or God Might, you end up losing your form, so you would have to start all over again. But with all of that being said, I will be ranking id as a B tier character despite him being my actual favorite. And up next we have Zeta, a character that is all about leaping into the air to perform 3 loop attacks into a combo finisher to deal as much damage as possible, as not only does her combo finisher become more powerful, but she also applies the Arves Fermari debuff, which is unique to Zeta and is going to increase her damage output. Thankfully she has various ways of being able to constantly apply the debuff, with Infinite Wonders being a ranged projectile that has 3 different charges, so she will be able to maintain that debuff pretty much always active. Additionally, she has a skill that lets her leap off into the air very quickly, so that she doesn't have to spend a lot of time on the ground doing basic attacks, which wouldn't deal a lot of damage and would only end up harming her. That being said, Zeta does have a counter that is very good, as it deals good damage, applies the debuff, and lets her go into the air at once. And thanks to the skill Vengeful Flames granting supplementary damage to Zeta, which stacks with the supplementary damage from the sigils, she's capable of dealing quite a lot of damage, and she will be able to dodge a lot of attacks while dealing this damage, as most bosses won't have a way to hit her while she is in the air. And to top it all off, Zeta counts with Wing Clipper, which is going to grant her the best CC in the game in the form of paralysis. So having this ability is already fantastic. You do need to take into account that whenever performing these looping attacks, there is a perfect timing that needs to be hit for her to deal as much damage as possible, because otherwise Zeta is going to come crashing down and her damage output is going to be much lower. Additionally, while you can dodge in the air, not having the option to block attacks may lead to you getting hit more often than you would like. And somewhat similarly to Rosetta, whenever the bosses move around and Zeta is in the air performing her loops, many times she won't be able to cover the entire distance with a single loop, and so she will have to come crashing down, miss the boss, and so she may have to spend a skill just to get back up into the air, or do basic attacks if there are no alternatives. So again, her damage output can plummet in those scenarios. There is quite a lot going for this character, and she actually has more CC than just paralysis. She's capable of applying damage over time thanks to the skill Thousand Flames, which is going to inflict the enemy with burn, and she can also lower the enemy's attack by 20% with the skill Rain of Fury. But at the end of the day, nothing is better than paralysis in my opinion, and given that Zeta is at the end of the day a selfish DPS character, I feel like going with this setup is going to be much more powerful, so ultimately you end up with a powerful selfish DPS character that also has the ability to apply paralysis. That being said, from all of the damage calculations that I have seen, she doesn't quite reach the Charlotta and Narmaya tier in terms of damage, although she is quite competent, so ultimately I will be ranking Zeta as an A tier character. If we get a balanced patch in Granblue Fantasy Relink, I'll be sure to update the tier list with the Lucilius raid, and of course once Sophon and Toyen are released, so do look forward to that. In the meantime, let me know which characters you would rank differently. With that being said, thank you all so much for watching, my name is Dark Hero, and as always, happy hunting!